Hello. I think hello.
I'm great today.
Your weekly podcast on every disability. With me today is Liesl Tesch. Hello, how are you, Liesl?
I'm really good today. I've had a busy week and I'm looking forward to a busy weekend and then a week of Parliament, a week of wheelchair basketball, then another week of Parliament, then a little bit of ice sled hockey. So it's the sporting time of the year for me. It doesn't happen very often, but I've got a couple of busy weeks ahead.
Before we get started, we'd like to acknowledge the traditions and of the people we are calling on, and sorry, obstructing disability, which is to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that we record dwell on CripChat Australia. They also recognize people with disabilities, those who are living full and complete lives, and those whose needs are not being met. When listening, we ask you to reflect on this and help bring about an Australian society where people with disabilities feel included and belong. Leaders, what prompted the established monopoly disability lawyers?
Yeah, this Royal Commission came about in 2019 in response to community concern about widespread report of violence against, neglect and abuse and exploitation of people with disabilities. And these incidents may have happened recently or a long time ago, but realistically it was about people with disability having a voice at the federal government table, sharing their experiences. I think bearing their all about the frustrations and challenges that we live with and we've lived with for a long period of time across Australia.
What was some of the most significant findings?
Well, I think after 4 years and over nearly 10,000 submissions by people with disabilities, really revealing from the heart the conditions of which we've lived in, there was a huge cross-section of findings that came out of the whole thing. It's really about the human rights of people with disabilities. It's about making sure that we are included. For me, I'm absolutely passionate about employment, so that was a significant finding there. As a former teacher, I think education is super important. As someone, I'm the New South Wales Member of Parliament for Gosford, and I know in our state and across Australia, housing is a massive issue for the general population and the housing shortage, and even more so for people with disabilities, so there's work to be done there. The discussion of group homes or not group homes was part of that consideration, and I think the reality is that this is something that it's not just a federal discussion, it's something that will move forward as all the states working together to try and work out the best possible solutions that we can to improve the lives and inclusion of people with disabilities in Australia, and for me in New South Wales.
Hello, Leslie. Good to have you back on CripChat.
G'day, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Tell us from your experiences, employment rates are low for people with disability. Some people with disability are finding it difficult to find employment and they've kind of given up. How important is it for people with disability to get into the workplace?
Absolutely important to get into the workplace, and I think the Royal Commission has put people with disabilities first and foremost at the front, and so we're being heard in a way that we haven't been heard before. It's given us a power, but also there's a power, I think, coming from our voices rising up, but also the Royal Commission is about the top-down delivery of changes that we need to see across Australia and also in New South Wales, my perspective, about how we can be more inclusive in workplaces. So people with disabilities who have, like even Amanda Rishworth yesterday when she made the announcement, said, hey, employers, open your brains up. People with disabilities have got so many talents. Stop using your own discriminatory frameworks regarding employment, and let's think about all aspects of how we can get people with disabilities more employed, employable, not just part-time employed, not just underemployed, and also how we can manage that with our pensions, but also the discussion about employment for people with complex disabilities and where we go towards open employment and payment for people with complex disabilities and employment. So it's a starting point, and I think the Royal Commission was a journey that we all went on, and it's just for change, even though we've already seen significant investment from the federal government. And I know from the federal government, we're going to have a new specialised disability employment program commencing on the 1st of July next year. And we're also going to have a Disability Employment Centre of Excellence. From a governing perspective, that guiding light is going to be really important to help lever it from the bottom up at grassroots level into employment. Yeah, I'm absolutely with you.
No, that sounds awesome. Sounds promising. Also, Liesl, I heard that people with disability, they get into employment. I paid $2.30 an hour. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's not very fair. It's not going to be the Royal Commission that dictates that. It's going to be another federal government body about employment and employment wages that actually dictates the outcome for that, but it's something that's on the table. And I think the outcome of the Royal Commission was a whole bunch of recommendations, some of them accepted and some of them are accepted in principle. So a lot of those that are accepted in principle have got transition work to do before they actually become embedded and we've got actual outcomes. But accepted in principle is about moving towards the outcomes in however we can shape them in the future, and that pay rate for people with disabilities is part of that conversation.
So thank you for sharing. Jonathan, do you have anything to add?
to understand how some advocates may get frustrated with the pace of change.
Yes, absolutely. And I am a wheelchair user, so I live with that pace of change and the frustrations. I came into a parliament that wasn't accessible and inclusive 7 years later. We're still working on that. And it's not something, this is a whole of society attitudinal shift as well. So the pace of change, I'd love to say we can snap our fingers and fix everything overnight, but it's a slow burn, and it's got a lot of that has to have budget wrapped around it. The federal government has already spent, I think, $3 billion towards improving the lives of people with disabilities prior the announcement of the Royal Commission. I'd like to say in New South Wales, under the previous government, we saw disability employment go from 4.7% down to 2.5%. I'd like to get back to 4.7 and beyond in a heartbeat, but it's a slow change to make sure that all the government departments have got really good, when they go out to ask people about their jobs and come on board to put their ads out, that they're inclusive. When they do their interviews and communications about their jobs, that they're inclusive. That the adjustments are made to be in the workplace to be inclusive, and that once people are in the workplace, they've also got the opportunity for promotion. But none of that's something that happens overnight. So that's something we're working with in this example of employment with government departments to make sure that every step of the way for employment is actually inclusive, and it allows that possibility to increase that percentage of numbers of people with disabilities back in. So it's not something that's super going to happen overnight. I'd also like to say that our treatment in hospitals, like all of a sudden, all the doctors and all the nurses and all the systems are going to perfectly understand your disability, my disability, your disability and her disability. But it's going to take an education process to make sure that we are included every step of the way. But the Royal Commission has definitely made that loud and clear, and it's putting pressure on the federal government but also on the state governments to make the changes we need.
Thank you for that. And so, what are your thoughts on the recommendations regarding segregation and inclusive education?
Well, that was an interesting one and quite, I think, a bit split on the Commission, but also split in the community. As a former teacher, I thought I've got a part of a Master's in Special Education because I wanted to get a better understanding of the needs of kids with intellectual disabilities and other diverse ability. So I taught in a mainstream school with a support unit where we had kids integrated into mainstream, and I think that is becoming much more of the norm. We've also in my electorate got Glenvale Special School, which is an amazing special school. It's a segregated environment, and at this point in time when I speak to the families and tell them, if I had told them that was going to shut down, they would be horrified. The changes towards inclusive education are also something that's going to be a slow burn. It will be delivered by the states, not by the federal government, but it's something that you're not going to say, we're going to shut down those schools overnight and put those kids that have been really comfortable in the segregated schools into mainstream. And the parents are there. Sometimes kids don't get accepted very easily. There's bullying in mainstream schools. So at this point in time, and to make that, once again, a transitional slow change alongside the community and families of kids with disabilities, but I believe there's much more work to be done about including kids with disabilities in mainstream education, and that's the step that then leads into mainstream employment.
Thank you for sharing, Liesl. What message do you have for the government and policymakers regarding the Commission's findings?
Well, it's interesting because I'm called the Parliamentary Secretary for Disability Inclusion in the state of New South Wales. So our Minister for Disability Inclusion, the fabulous, amazing Kate Washington, has been part of meeting with all the Ministers for Disabilities across the states and territories, as well as Bill Shorten and 16 federal ministers to make this work. So it's not a quick decision, and we in New South Wales have had really big consultation with the disability community. So we've got a group called the New South Wales Disability Council, which is made up of people with disabilities and people without disabilities, allies who are experts who give us their input, and we also consult with all the stakeholders to get there. So the government policies are not something that Kate Washington decides, or not something that Bill Shorten decides. This is something that is decided in collaboration with the stakeholders who live these policies. So it's not something that happens quickly. And the other thing is, this might be a disability policy, but it sits under the education department. So therefore we've got another minister and a whole other department about what the policy looks like in there. So it wouldn't be a disability policy, it'd be sitting under the education department about school segregation and where we go from there. So it's a complex future moving forward about where we go with policies, but it's actually really lovely as a person, as a wheelchair user and a person with disabilities to be at the table. In the opposition in New South Wales, we've got Gareth Ward, who also lives with a disability, he's got vision impairment. So it's really important that I think that people with disabilities are there putting their hand up to be representative and be at the table. And that's what we do, not only with me in the place, ramming them in my wheelchair, telling to make sure they include us, but also we've got lots of people in the New South Wales Disability Council who are experts putting pressure on us to make all of those policy changes. One, for example, is about the inclusivity of all the technology. So making sure that technology is inclusive. So if you get a job in the workplace and you're vision impaired, all your technology is correct. But that doesn't happen overnight. We've got to make sure all the reasonable adjustments are in place. But also we've got to teach people how to make those reasonable adjustments in place. So there's many components of policy making moving forward. And a lot of those steps are already in place. Does that help with that answer?
Yeah, fair enough. So thank you for that, Liesl.
Cool.
And so
I think you touched on this, but how can the broader community support the implementation of these recommendations?
Well, I think our Disability Council is the start of the stakeholders, but beyond the Disability Council, we also have regular meetings with various stakeholder groups. So we've got Cerebral Palsy Alliance, we've got the Council for Intellectual Disability, we've got the Physical Disability Council, we've got lots of groups that have got people with disabilities, with various disabilities involved. We've got Down Syndrome New South Wales, so we meet with these groups that are impacted. And I think it's the leadership of those groups, and it might be the board, the chairperson of the board that we meet with, but it's the people within the advocacy groups that are giving advice. So I know Minister Washington meets with the head of Down Syndrome New South Wales, with Cerebral Palsy Alliance, and it's those groups that are providing input about how they need to see the changes and the policies moving forward. We're working closely with Get Skilled Access, which Gillian Alcott was the founder of that organisation, and that organisation employs lots of people with disabilities, and that organisation in New South Wales is working with health, it's working with education, it's working with tourism, it's working with police, fire and rescue, and that's using people with disabilities. I've got a fabulous, lovely lady who's blind, running focus groups, talking to firemen, talking to police, talking to people in the health system about how to be more inclusive. So people on the ground with disabilities as advocates are already working in that sector. So advocacy groups are the main, I think, direct policy influencer, but it's guys like you that are having conversations and encouraging people to actually talk to our police to make the changes that suit the community. It's really, it's not just the minister, the able-bodied minister, making the decisions on behalf of all of us. It really is, and that's the Royal Commission. The Royal Commission is the voice of people with disabilities, shaping a new future for Australia.
Yep, sure is. Thank you, Liesl.
You're welcome.
We answered that question, and move on to the next question. I'm sorry, so what are your hopes for the future in terms of disability rights and inclusion?
Well, I wouldn't put my hand up to be in the Parliament if I didn't have massive belief that we can have a better Australia for people with disabilities. And I get frustrated almost every day because we're not there yet, as do people with disabilities, and this is the voice. But I actually think we are on track. I don't know if it's going to be perfect by 2027 or 2034, but I think it's a burning change that we're a part of, and we're doing it at our own individual levels from the grassroots up. But it's really nice to know that the government heard the voices of people with disabilities and initiated the Royal Commission. Admittedly, we're not accepting all of the recommendations, and a lot of those recommendations at federal level, and quite a few of those recommendations are at state level. A lot of those recommendations are accepted in principle, but it's going to be time and money and prioritisation of governments to see the changes that we need to see across New South Wales and Australia.
No, awesome. Keep up with the amazing work that you do, we are leaders in the space.
It really is lovely to be in here, that I know that I'm accountable to you guys, but I also know that you guys have got my back.
Oh, we sure do.
It really is. And so, I know, and even like next week in Parliament, we've got a group of people coming in to put down a petition about the building access codes, to try and improve the building access codes. So I'm putting pressure on our Minister for Better Regulation, our Minister for Planning, as well as our Minister for Housing, about making sure that the building codes, and especially when the government builds houses, that all of those are as accessible as possible. In New South Wales, we've got something called the Transport Orientated Development, which means we're building more high-rise apartments near train stations, which is great for wheelchair access in apartments, and it's also good because we're upgrading the train station and making them accessible. So we're just pushing to make sure that all those apartments are accessible, so we can jump into those apartments when they come too.
Awesome. I look forward to it. So building on that, how can individuals and organisations get involved in the advocacy efforts?
Well, it depends what disability you've got. Have a bit of a search out where your passions lie. Like Cerebral Palsy Alliance has, I'm not sure how long they've been involved, but Kate Washington and I regularly have meetings with a group of advocates on CP Active. So that's a young group of people in Cerebral Palsy Alliance. So get yourself into a group that resonates with you and be part of their regular meetings and be part of their voice to Parliament. That's what it's about. So I meet regularly with Down Syndrome Australia. They put submissions in. Whenever we've got something in the Parliament, they put submissions in. I've got a lovely lady called Jodie Hoger who works at TAFE, who's blind. We had an inquiry into procurement, which is when the government buys stuff, and Jodie actually came in and she presented to the committee and talked about how important it is to make sure all the technology that the government buys is accessible to people who are vision impaired. So there's many ways to tune in. Write to your local member of Parliament, write to your minister, but get involved in those groups that are part of the advocacy organisation. Disability, we've got the Disability Employment Network, there's lots of different groups. Do a bit of Googling and searching and jump on board and be part of the group, because a lot of the time you're in with people with like-minded passions who have become experts over the years.
True. Encourage everyone to get out there. That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And we as leaders, just lead these amazing individuals, to become leaders within their own community. Awesome. Liesl, what are the key messages from the Royal Commission and government's response? Sorry.
It's pretty tough to sum it up, but this is about the human rights of people with disabilities. That's what we went in to hear about, and that's what we heard about, but it really is about safeguarding people with disabilities in the community and making sure our communities become more accessible and more inclusive. And so federally, like on the state parliament, they're going to review Australia's disability strategy, and realistically, I think the inclusive employment, I've just got all the autonomy and access, education, housing is a huge part of it. There's many aspects of, it's really a very big, broad church, and there's very many different government departments working on these solutions. I've already got a gang of wheelchair users coming in next week, so